Hi, and welcome to The Upside. I'm your host, Paul Santinello. It's a show where we talk about good things that are happening in Long Meadow. Today, my special guest is Anthony Gulluni. Anthony, welcome.
Thank you.
Anthony is the Democrat nominee. We're taping the show before November 4th, the elections, but in essence is the district attorney-elect for Hampden County. And we're going to talk to Anthony today about a variety of issues and why he got into the race and what he's going to see, or what he sees as the issues that he's going to be facing as DA. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
LCTVs provides a great format for us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why you got into the DA race, and we'll just go from there.
Sure. I was in the office for about 5.5 years before Mark Mastriani, who was the district attorney, was nominated for a federal judgeship and was really in the process of leaving. So it became clear that the next election was going to be an open seat. Through my work in the DA's office, really developed a love for criminal justice and the work that we specifically do as prosecutors. Add to that, I'm a lifelong Springfield resident, so a lifelong Hampden County resident, and I believe in the area and I believe in its potential. So being in the office and seeing this opportunity arise, which was unexpected, of course, Mark won his first term in 2010, so the anticipation was he would be around for a while. So this opportunity presenting itself and realizing my passion for the job and my love of this area and getting some encouragement from some key people, I decided to run. That decision was made probably in March, and we went through the process of getting signatures and the challenges that come with that. Being a first-time candidate for any office, I learned as I went, but as time went on, it really became a terrific experience.
Okay, and that's fun, huh? Running for office your first time, and you didn't run for like a little selectman seat, like you went for the whole enchilada. You went for the DA.
I jumped in a big pool. Yeah, for sure.
Now, one of the things that I've heard. I've had on my show Anthony Signoli, and Tony and I go back to high school, and I heard him on one of the radio stations talking about how you got into the race late, that you actually took a leave of absence from work but continued to work.
Well, I took a leave of absence starting on May 1st.
Yep.
So, I had made the decision to run before that, and I was mildly campaigning, spending as much time as I could outside of work, of course, in attending events and marshaling support for my candidacy. But on May 1st, I actually announced my candidacy, submitted my signatures, and became an official candidate and began my leave of absence from the DA's office. So it really began in earnest on May 1st and then shot from there, which was later than the other three candidates.
Right, but I guess what I'm getting to is you were working a case above and beyond. But you're already out of the office, but you continue to work on a case to make sure that it went through, or
no.
I didn't
do that. There was some, of course, interaction with my colleagues there on some cases I had and making sure that things were handled smoothly.
Yep.
But no, once I stepped away, I couldn't really have any meaningful involvement.
But was the late start because of work, or were you just really thinking about it and hadn't made a decision at the time?
It was a couple different things.
Yeah.
I made the decision, I think, in early March, at which point I had 50 cases as a Superior Court prosecutor, as all of us do in that position, and there were things I needed to see through, and I just wasn't comfortable kind of dropping and leaving. But of course, there was the process that came along with that, and getting the signatures and making the final decision, and needing an income, because since May 1st, I haven't had an income, of course. It's an unpaid leave of absence.
Okay, it's a beautiful, thankless thing to do, right, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's talk about, now that you're, and I'm calling you the district attorney-elect because I think it's November 4th is 4 to 5 days away, and
sure.
I don't see a write-in campaign on the horizon. You become district attorney-elect. You set up a transition team. What are the biggest challenges you see? Because you were in the office for 5.5 years, even before Mark Mastriani was the district attorney. What do you see as the biggest challenges that you're going to have once January rolls around and you are the district attorney?
Well, I think we've got issues involving crime in our urban areas in Hampden County, which really calls upon our core function of working in the courthouse, in the courtroom, prosecuting cases. But my intention, and what I talked a lot about as a candidate, is being proactive in preventing crime. And that's something that we've done to some degree in the office now, and going back a few years, even into District Attorney Bennett's administration, but it's something I really want to bolster. It's something I want to be a feature piece of my administration, getting out into the community, engaging in education and prevention programs that really serve to get to these young kids, especially in these urban centers in our county, young and before they come in the direction of the courthouse. So that's going to be a big challenge to kind of get that programming up and running. Needless to say, there are huge ministerial tasks that come with being the district attorney, and coming in January 7th will be the day on which I'm sworn in. There'll be a lot. There'll be the full weight of the office upon me and my staff, and it will take a period of acclimation and a lot of hard work to get up to speed. But I am so excited to take on the responsibilities of the office. Paul, you mentioned my position now as a quasi DA-elect, quasi candidate. November 4th is more or less a formality at this juncture without a write-in candidate who's put his or her name in and being unopposed without an independent or Republican. I'm looking forward to officially being the DA-elect and focusing full bore on the transition.
Okay. Now, I watch Law and Order, so I know how this all works.
Sure, yeah. It's not a bad representation, yeah.
Right, but that's the front scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you talked about the administration side of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be a huge monster behind it to make that office run. One of the biggest things that I've heard about, and I think it's been reported here and there, Hampden County is the second busiest courthouse in the state, but not the second largest funded courthouse in the state.
It depends on how you cut it. So we have a Superior Court and we have several district courts. Our Springfield District Court, which actually handles cases from here in Long Meadow and Springfield and West Springfield, is among the top 3 busiest in terms of how many cases are coming in and being disposed of.
Okay.
Depending on the year, it's 1, 2, or 3. Our Superior Court, of which we have one in the entire county that handles the more serious cases, in fiscal year 2013 was indeed the busiest across the Commonwealth. Of the 11 districts, we have 13 counties in Massachusetts, but 11 districts like we have just to the north of us. You have Franklin and Hampshire counties combined into one district with DA Dave Sullivan. So we disposed of something near 800 cases in our Superior Court. Our funding, and for many years we were 7th of those 11 districts in funding. In the past couple of years, our budget has incrementally increased to make us 5th of those 11 districts, which, as you alluded to, is not commensurate with the level of work we're doing. Right. So being 1st or 2nd in number of cases disposed, and if you look at it sort of more anecdotally, we're handling very serious cases as well. Those numbers are not representative of that, but we're handling very serious cases too, complex cases. So our funding, and it will be an effort of mine to really bring our funding in line with the level of work we're doing. And that's going to depend on a few different things. Of course, that's going to depend on our state legislators, the folks that represent us here, and having a good relationship with them, which I've already begun doing. And also working on sort of supplemental budgetary items. Grant money and our forfeiture funds are going to help to bolster our budget to make sure we have the correct employees, we can retain those employees with sufficient salaries, and we have enough money and resources to do the kind of outreach we need to do to make Hampden County a better place.
Okay. And it's kind of funny you don't think about, right, Hampden County having the #1 caseload for the whole state. When you think about Boston and
Sure.
Bigger areas, is there a reason why that is?
I could hazard a guess, and I think being in Western Massachusetts my entire life, we are a little bit of out of sight, out of mind, and as a result, we don't get the attention in terms of budgets across the board, and whether that's our local aid in cities and towns, and other budgets, the Sheriff's Department, those that are here in Hampden County with us, it's consistent. I think it's a matter of making sure that those numbers are known. So it's going to be upon me and my staff to make sure that our legislators know the level of work we're doing, the things we're doing, the fact that we need a higher budget, the fact that, in some sense it's unfair that we're doing X amount of work and getting X amount of dollars, and those things, as we mentioned, really don't match. So it's going to be making the case essentially to our legislators and making sure we're the squeaky wheel.
Now, does it, with Mark Mastriani, and I know he wasn't in there for the full term, but, federal judgeship comes up, and there's an opportunity there, I think, that it's hard to pass up. I mean, I think it's an honor to be nominated, number one. Does that hurt the office in the sense that You know, there's not, you know, you had, I think Bill Bennett was there for 20 years, and before that, Matty Ryan was there from the creation of the court system, I guess. You know, you have that longevity. I'm sure you get more familiar with the legislators, and is that a challenge you think that's going to be there for you?
I think continuity is important. I think Bill Bennett's 20 years, and you know, he's someone for whom I have the utmost respect, and I think he served the county with dignity and with great skill. So it does benefit, I think, the office and then ultimately its functionality and how we serve Hampden County to have some consistency in staffing and policies, those consistency in relationships that you mentioned with legislators and the folks with whom we have to work. So it's my intention to be here for the long term.
Yep.
You know, Mark was my boss and is a dear friend. Again, someone for whom I have a lot of respect, and you know, his opportunity to be a federal judge, as you mentioned, is just incredible, and we're so proud of him.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a great reflection on the office, that you had someone who had that quality that was district attorney.
Sure.
I don't look at it as a negative. I think it's a huge reflection that we actually had someone that was qualified to be a judge running the criminal, the number one criminal justice person in Hampden County. So I think that's all.
I've got very big shoes to fill.
Oh, absolutely. I think in a couple of ways, right? So what? So now that you've been in the office for 5.5 years or so, working, and obviously there are certain things that you do and have some administrative function because you have to report your own. I'm sure some of your things that you do. Where do you see the biggest challenge? Because you have a transition, but you're already in the office now. For Mark Mastriani, I know he was an assistant district attorney, but then was out of in private practice. And then, so where do you see what's the transition look like for you? Is it a long transition? Is it just getting more familiar with some of those things that you never had to pay attention to because you were prosecuting?
I think it's an advantage for me to have been in the office and really at all levels in those 5.5 years. I mean, I started from the bottom and worked my way up under the Bennett and Mastriani administrations. Worked with the folks in district court, worked with the folks in superior court, worked with some folks in juvenile court and our outlying district court. So I know how things work. I know how people work, and I know you know, what motivates people and what doesn't, because I've been in those chairs. I've been in the courtrooms. So I think anybody coming into an office like this with about 160 employees, 60 some odd lawyers, there's going to be some learning curve. You know, there's going to be a time during which you know, you're getting familiar and used to some of the unique functions and responsibilities of the DA. But having been there and seeing how things work and working very closely with Mark for the last few years and working closely with his upper level staff and really being a part of that, I think puts me in a good position to make it a very smooth transition. You know, I think we'll probably talk about the time leading up to January 7th, but in terms of after January 7th, I feel well positioned, and certainly the next couple of months will be about preparing for that day one and being ready. Okay,
so November 4th comes along, you're DA-elect. At that point in time, they give you the keys, right? They say, right now you have to knock on the doorway, right? But you get the keys, you get to go in. There's a district attorney, an interim district attorney that was appointed by the governor, right? And so what happens on November 5th? I mean, November 4th, hopefully everybody's happy. November 5th, you might be sleeping a little bit later than normal.
Maybe a little bit of rest.
November 6th, let's say.
No, in all seriousness, Jim Orenstein is the interim district attorney who's done a terrific job and is a prosecutor of the highest order, is actually a Long Meadow resident. So to have him in place to help me and my folks get ready and have the resources we need to prepare for day one, I think is critical to my ultimate success and the office's ultimate success, most importantly. But come next week, you know, we're asking folks to get out and vote on November 4th, of course, and I'm unopposed, but please connect that line for me, and assuming things go as we plan, I've begun the transition process already. You know, I've focused on campaigning and focused on getting my message out, even in the last few weeks. I'm only the Democratic nominee, as you mentioned at the outset of the show. So we've tried to respect the process, but I've begun at least thinking about the transition team I'll put together. So the first orders of business will be really putting a transition team together of people that can assist me in getting personnel situated, making sure we bring in the best people and we have the best people that are going to serve the people of Hampden County on January 7th and in the years to come. But also it's going to be about getting policies and initiatives in place, making sure the organizational chart of the office is together. looking at how we can just be ready on day one. And I mentioned that I've been in the office for a period of time, and I think that prepares me uniquely to take the reins and be ready, but it's a busy place, as we talked about.
Right.
And we do very important things there, and it's very important to Hampden County, even the work we do day to day. So it's going to be my absolute focus to be ready on day one to work as best as we can to fulfill that trust the voters put in me.
Okay. You talked about, having some initiatives in terms of crime and fighting crime and so forth. And, typically, like I said, when you watch Law and Order, the DA's office is the last stop that,
Sure.
Before the show ends. But how does the DA's office intervene? Because, I grew up in Springfield, and I think it was a great city to grow up in. I've been in Long Meadow, I think, for 2 years longer than I lived in Springfield, and I still refer to Springfield as home a lot of times, and a lot of family there and stuff and friends. And as I said, it was a great, when you're in the neighborhood, it was a great place to grow up and so forth. And it's changed, obviously, and the crime today isn't what the crime was then. I think it was amazing to hear about a murder when I was a young kid growing up, and I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to, now it's almost routine when you hear them being reported. How does the district attorney's office go into the communities? And you have all of Hampden County, so it's not just Springfield. There's crime everywhere, obviously. But how does the district attorney's office go into the communities and try to prevent it before it even starts to get going?
As you mentioned, Hampden County is a big place, 23 cities and towns, very diverse in terms of socioeconomics and geography, all kinds of things. It goes from places like Long Meadow to places like Springfield and Holyoke, and those different places present different issues in terms of crime. So it's gonna vary, but some of the programs we're doing now, I think, can be adapted. So, for instance, we have a distracted driving program, in which we have a group of prosecutors and staff people that go out to all the high schools across the county systematically to hit sophomores and juniors who are about the age of getting a license,
Yep.
to talk to them about distracted driving, which is inclusive of texting and driving and talking on your cell phone while driving and drinking and driving. And it's been, I think, very effective
Okay.
in educating these kids about the dangers of those things. I think in our urban areas, particularly places like Holyoke and Springfield, we've got to get into the middle schools and use that approach to talk about the dangers, the harm of guns and drugs and gangs, because that is really at the heart of the problems and the murders we're seeing so routinely, very sadly, in places like Springfield and Holyoke. It's almost inevitably related back somehow to the drug trade, to gangs, and of course to guns that are at the very center of the problem. So it's going to be important to hit these kids young, to say this is what's going to happen. It's going to be death or it's going to be jail if you take this road. Don't take the road. Hopefully we never see you in the courthouse. I think more generally in the kind of things we'll do that will apply to things like Long Meadow is just getting out and opening ourselves up. My plan is to have sort of a bridge, part of the transition, to get together a group of people representative of the communities in Hampden County, including Long Meadow, including the African American community and Hispanic communities, but places in Springfield and Palmer and so forth, to advise me and my staff as to how we can better serve those communities and get out. So starting now, the community outreach. So those folks, those advisors can come back to me and say, these are the issues. Then once the administration starts, I had an idea that I talked about as a campaigner to have community impact team meetings where we're going into neighborhoods, into communities, advertising that the district attorney, assistant district attorneys, and staff members are going to have sort of a town hall open meeting where anybody can come in, just not the community leaders or elected officials, but anybody can come in and have those kinds of frank, one-on-one conversations with members of my office so we can ultimately better serve all of Hampden County.
Yeah. It's amazing, and I agree. I mean, again, going back, I used to promote boxing and manage fighters and things like that, and I've seen it where kids that were really young. I mean, some of them were not much older than my kids were at the time, and the pressures of gang life. And there's not a lot of alternatives, and I don't know if they know about alternatives. And I think, when I was in high school, you never saw anybody from the district attorney, you never saw anybody from the police department, in a proactive basis. And I think that's important, and I'm glad to hear that, because I think that's how you prevent some of this from even getting to. I mean, there's some of it you're never going to stop, and that's why you're there. Sure. And then there's other things hopefully you can stop, so you never have to be there.
And Paul, we have limited resources, as we discussed, both in time, personnel, and finances. but we can partner with organizations like the YMCA and the Salvation Army who have more of that direct reach into the community. And we've done it before and we'll continue to do it using some of our forfeiture funds that come from those drug cases and giving some money to a place like the YMCA to establish a boxing program that can take these kids when they get out of school or in the summers off the streets, away from those negative influences, and get them involved in something positive. Right. Additionally, I've already met with Commissioner Warwick of the Springfield School Department to talk about how we can augment what the schools are doing and how we can keep kids in schools, involved in athletics and academics, and away from some of the negativity. And obviously the partnership there is going to be critical. So ultimately it's going to be about partnerships. It's going to be about opening the doors up so we can get in and out. People can come in, we can go out. And even in places like Long Meadow that are experiencing issues with heroin and opiate addiction, that's across the county. We're going to involve in some education surrounding that and making sure that when folks come into the courthouse with those issues, the root causes of whatever crime they're committing, we're addressing that root cause, because the opiate addiction problem is becoming an epidemic, and it doesn't go by town or economic status. It's equal opportunity, very unfortunately.
Right. It's an equal opportunity drug, unfortunately, like you said. So what do you think is your biggest challenge that you're going to have as district attorney? Now, you like being in a courtroom, I assume, because you've been. So do you anticipate you'll continue to do that?
I do. We have a unique and I think respectable tradition of our district attorneys in Hampden County trying cases. You go back to Matty Ryan, who you mentioned was around for a very long time. Tenacious litigator. I didn't know him, but I've heard many stories about him, some more colorful than others, but all just someone who was committed to the cause and was willing to really aggressively act as a prosecutor to make sure public safety was the focus. But Bill Bennett for 20 years tried many cases, and Mark Mastriani in a short time tried, I think, 5 or 6 cases in about 3.5 years. So I hope to continue that tradition, but I think that's a small piece of it. As I mentioned, there's 60 some odd assistant district attorneys that are going to handle the lion's share of the court work. My focus is going to be on, at least initially, getting an office that's well functioning, getting the right personnel and policies to make sure we're doing the job in the courtroom, and starting some programs so we're preventing crime and ultimately affecting public safety. But in the next year or so, I intend to get in the courtroom and try some cases and hopefully set a standard for all the members of my office. Okay,
I'm going to take like a Charlie Baker, Martha Coakley debate question, and I'll throw it out at you. Now, what was you had never campaigned before?
No.
Okay, so what was the funniest thing that you thought that happened on that campaign that you weren't expecting? Because you went all over Hampden County. I know what it's like to campaign in a little town,
Yeah.
So, what did you find that was a little bit? First of all, let me go back. You can think about that for a second. Did you think it was going to be as hard as it was? Because I think most people get into it, and you have a picture. You're running for district attorney, and someone lays out a game plan. But did you think it was going to be as hard as it was?
I had no idea.
Yeah.
It was far more mentally, emotionally, and physically exhausting than I ever could have anticipated or ever thought. Hampden County is a very big place, and despite having been here my whole life, I didn't understand just the sheer size of it in terms of geography. You go out to Tolland and Holland on the other side, and it's a really, really big place. And the way in which we campaigned was to really see all sectors and all places in Hampden County. I went out to the Wales Chicken Barbecue about a month before the election. I was before the Holland Select Board. We certainly spent a lot of time in the urban areas in places like Springfield and Chicopee and West Side and Holyoke, but really went all throughout the county. Spent a lot of time in Long Meadow. Spent a lot of time waving at cars over by the highway in the Picknelly Field in Long Meadow, introducing ourselves to folks. So it was really, really exhausting and trying in some respects. It was all I did. I spent 12, 13, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, especially as we got closer to the election, and really was focused on getting my message out and meeting as many people as possible and letting them know who I am and trying to get them to really believe in me and believe in what I could do for the county. And of course, we're very pleased with the primary results. So it was a real challenge, but ultimately, looking back, it was a tremendous experience, something from which I learned a lot about myself and self-confidence and just challenging myself, and met so many great people in the course of it as well.
And if you knew about it in the beginning, the way you knew about it in the end, would you?
I think I would have.
Yeah.
I think I still would have. It worked out. So.
But it's, and, and it's like I said, I mean, I'm doing this in a little town, and it can be strenuous. I mean, like you said, 23 cities and towns, and it's diverse. I mean, there's some places you went to,
Sure.
the center of town was here, and the rest of the town is out here, and you had a campaign in it.
Sure.
And you have to, because that's part of your job. You're representing them. You have to. So what was the thing that you thought was either the most unusual thing you did or didn't do, or funniest thing that you saw in there?
I think one of the more unusual things, something that really took some getting used to, was doing the standouts. And by standouts, I mean getting a couple friends and staying at a busy intersection with your signs and waving at people. I mean, that was really difficult. I mean, going from being in the courtroom, trying cases, and being before a judge, and being sort of in a proper environment, to putting on a button-up shirt and a pair of khakis and grabbing a sign at 7 o'clock in the morning and waving at cars and people as they went to work was really took some getting used to.
Yep.
But like anything else, we did it a lot. We thought it was important, especially with a name like Gulluni. People had to see it a lot to get familiar with it, and it showed people how hard we wanted to work. And ultimately, I think a campaign, if it's done right, is essentially an audition to your potential employers, to your voters, and to say, hey, this is how I'm working as a candidate, and this is how I'm going to work as your elected official. I'm working hard. I'm doing it with integrity. I'm exposing myself as much as I possibly can in my ideas, and that's how I'll be as district attorney.
Yeah, and someone, and I can't think of who said that, but you can judge it's hard to judge how someone's going to be in office, but you can judge a candidate by the type of campaign they run. And I look at that a lot, because I'm a political junkie. I love it's a passion, it's a hobby, whatever. And when you look at, and first of all, I believe standouts are important. And I'll tell you a story afterwards where I got a vote that I never thought I was going to get a vote from someone, because it is. But it either can be the longest things in the world, the longest 2 hours of your life, or depending on who you have as company.
Sure.
Hopefully, there's coffee and good company, and it makes it go by fast. But and I really just want to say that to you, that the campaign that you ran, I think first of all you kept it at a very professional. You held the office in the proper decorum that it's supposed to be held in. You didn't make it, and I think that's important, because a lot of people don't realize that. You could have taken as many cheap shots against people. That's probably the political cheap shots. I'm not saying that you would, but some people would have recommended it perhaps to candidates to get up in the polls or whatever. But then you have to become the DA, and it's hard to. So for that, especially for that particular office, to me, you have to campaign at a high level, because you're going to go into a position that's at a high level. And I thought you did that very, very well. And I mean that sincerely. That as a political junkie, that I really believe that you ran a high level campaign that talked about issues, and wasn't necessarily talking about, look at what my opponents, how bad they are, or they didn't do this or didn't do that. And I think ultimately the voters respond to that, because as you can see in all the different races that we have going on right now, there's a lot of tit for tat going on in some of the races, and I think that turns people off on either side of the aisle, let alone the independents, which is, they don't want to be identified with either side of our parties. But I like I said, there's a decorum of the office, and I thought you upheld that well. And it's those little things, and I think the things of standouts, sometimes they seem like the silliest things in the world to do. You feel like a ding-dong out there waving at cars. And, as long as you don't get flipped off, that's pretty good sign to people. But I mean, it's, but people see you out there, and they see you working at it, and they say, wait a minute, okay, this person's out here waving for, a DA position, and they might not know you, but they see the sign, they see you, and then they see a commercial or something, and they put them together, and it connects, and it's all those little things that make up the big win. And you had a nice decisive win, so it wasn't like you had to go for a recount. So I think the people responded to the type of campaign that you ran, and I that's a compliment to you.
Thank you, Paul,
I really
for those
do think
kind
so.
words.
So we have. Unless we want to talk for an hour, we have a few more minutes. So the question, I guess, I would have for you is that if you get to address this show, we're going to put it on Facebook eventually and that type of thing. And so what do you want people, as you're going into your administration, what do you want people to say to anybody, but also is there a message that you want from the district attorney's office?
I want to create an office and continue an office that that does the work of the people in the courtroom and serves to protect all the people of Hampden County. You know, we've got, I think, some changes coming in here in Hampden County, and it's close to folks in Long Meadow. That's the casino. There's going to be some development in downtown Springfield, more likely than not. You know, we'll see what happens on the 4th and how our legislators and Governor to-be deals with the decision. But I think in my position, we have to anticipate it, at least anticipate it. So it's going to be my mission to adapt to whatever happens in downtown Springfield and how it affects all of the county. But you know, I want to run an office that's open and transparent. My intention is to have someone focused on our public relations and our media relations to make sure that you know, the folks in Hampden County know what we're doing and know the hard work we're doing and know that we're working on their behalf. So that's an important aspect of things, but I want to make sure it's an open office where there's open communication, and whether it's folks in Long Meadow or folks in Springfield or Palmer or wherever, that they know they have a district attorney that's accountable and that's open to their feedback and open to discussion, essentially. So that's going to be part and parcel of our effort in getting out into the community and doing that kind of community outreach. But ultimately, we want to run an office that's based on integrity and hard work in making sure that people in Long Meadow and all over the county are safe.
Yeah, and I think that's important that people realize that, you know, obviously, you know, I think people see district attorney's office as not being accessible. Do you have plans for, whether you want to call it social media, you know, cyber stuff where people are interacting with you? Yeah,
our intention is to really professionalize our public and media relations. So I think this last administration started a website that's helpful and has some information, but I think it's going to be important for us, especially to relate and get information out, critical information, through modern social media. I mean, the things have changed. You know, social media is the method by which people get their news in some cases, the method by which they communicate with friends and organizations to a large extent. So we want to be a part of that. We have to be a part of that if we're going to be ultimately effective, and that dovetails really with our community outreach efforts and communicating with younger people and people all over this county. So we are going to have at least some kind of Facebook page and potentially a Twitter account so we can get out information when we need to. But again, I want to have somebody that's really dealing with that, so we're getting out the information that's critical to the media and to the people directly.
And I think that's important because it's not just younger people that are on social media, because obviously, you know, people my age and older and even, you know, are adapting to it, and you'll get more. It's funny because when we had that October storm almost 3 years ago on Halloween, or right before Halloween, here in Hampden County and Long Meadow got really affected by it. I was emailing out some of the things that were going on in town and had a lot of feedback about that because phone lines were down, you know, TV cable was out and that kind of thing. And that was just a little segment. And I think people as long as they're not driving, right, with their Facebook page. Yeah. But Facebook and Twitter are more means of communication than email now are today for most people. And that's their connection with their family and so forth. And that's a good thing to hear as well, because I think that's how you reach more people than just getting on front of the camera, and they're not reading the newspapers as much as and that type of thing. So I think you know, your plans of going social media is definitely going to have an effect. When you look at and we're going to finish up in a I don't know how much time we have, because we had 5 minutes, but I think that was about 6 minutes ago. Okay, we're going to wrap up. So, anything else on your mind that you want to say before we end the show?
I would like to thank the residents of Long Meadow, and thank you, Paul, of course, for having me and being here at Long Meadow High School, which is a gorgeous facility. But really thank the people of Long Meadow. You know, in the primary, which was really the election, as we discussed, we did tremendously well in Long Meadow, and I'm very thankful for the people of Long Meadow's support, and I urge them to get out and vote on November 4th. And I really look forward to being the district attorney for Long Meadow and all of Hampden County and serving the people with a lot of hard work and with integrity and with dignity for a long time to come.
Great, awesome, I want to just echo that, because I think Anthony's going to do a great job in the office. As I said, you know, vote on November 4th, because if you don't vote, you can't complain. That's number one. And your votes do have a consequence, and you do, you know, we've seen campaigns come down to the wire, and I think we might have some of those in this election in different communities. So get out there and vote. I want to thank Anthony for being on, and we'll talk to you in the next episode of The Upside. Have a great day.